The Defending Your Finances YouTube channel is committed to giving you all of the tools necessary to help you understand how to manage your investments and your financial planning. Unfortunately, financial planning is portrayed to be a complicated and tedious endeavor, leaving few people willing to try to do it on their own. The truth, however, is that it's a simple process that anyone can do on their own when they're given the right tools and understanding. Subscribe to our channel and receive all of the tools you need to do all of your own financial planning and never have to pay or rely on someone else being intelligent enough or honest enough to do the right thing for you or those you care about. In this video, I want to talk about the facts surrounding the creation of Bitcoin and provide facts and evidence that it may have been in the works long before it appeared on people's radars in 2009 and 2010. Recently, I was talking to Jim Carrillo at SwissAmerica, my friend and expert in the precious metals industry. We talk regularly about the crazy times that this country is witnessing today and the chain of events that has led us to where we are politically, environmentally, financially, and most importantly, spiritually. Jim was telling me about the chain of events that began in 2008, during which our nation experienced one of the most catastrophic financial meltdowns since the Great Depression. We were talking about how the Fed printed $700 billion as a band-aid to cover the hemorrhaging bullet wound that took the world financial system to the brink of collapse. Now, if you've watched my recent video about the tax of inflation that is brought about by the endless printing of currency, you know that the $700 billion is new debt that we, the taxpayer, bear the responsibility to repay. But we didn't see this money. The largest banks in the US saw this money in the form of a bailout. But that's neither here nor there. The reason I mention these facts is this. It was obvious to many governments and investors, both foreign and domestic, what was unfolding before their eyes. They recognized the deterioration of a country with a broken economy built on copious amounts of debt that is mathematically impossible to repay. One of the most important rules for any investor to follow is this. In order to protect against financial losses, one needs to eliminate investments in companies that show signs of deterioration or bankruptcy. In following these rules, many countries and individual investors around the world began quietly liquidating their investments in positions in United States Treasury bonds, which, if you didn't already know, U.S. Treasury bonds are billions of dollars worth of United States government debt that is packaged up and sold to other countries and hardworking U.S. investors as tax-free interest-paying conservative investments, and for which our tax dollars go to repay. The liquidation was due to a fear that one day the United States would soon default on both their interest payments as well as their ability to repay the principal investment. This sort of global liquidation of US debt should have crashed the US dollar, but it didn't. And why? See, it has to do with supply and demand. When sellers of an investment flood the market with a massive quantity of a specific investment, and there's not enough buyers to meet those sellers' demands, the value of the investment will quickly decrease hard and fast. So if the Fed didn't act quickly, the value of these government bonds would have crashed. And since the dollar is not backed by any hard assets like gold or silver, but backed by debt and trust, a collapse in the value of Treasury bonds would have, in turn, collapsed the dollar. Well, what was taking place outside of our view was this. The Fed began buying back this debt in a free and open market in an attempt to rescue the dollar from collapse. They did it quickly and quietly in an attempt to avoid creating panic and fear in the markets here at home. But this debt still needs to be repaid, and just like any other debtor, if they don't have the cash to repay the debt when it's due, bankruptcy risk exists. The kicker is that most of this debt was to be repaid in 10 years. That was in 2008. Well, it's been 10 years, and here we are being told that our economy, our stock market, and our nation is stronger than ever. Is this true? Is a major collapse of our nation's primary form of currency looming on the horizon? I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but it's my responsibility to deliver the truth and the facts to you, and what you do with them is up to you. Now I know what you're thinking. Dean, what does this have to do with Bitcoin? Well, hold on, I'm getting there. I want to take you back in time to January 9th, 1988. Check out the cover of The Economist magazine. This particular issue of The Economist depicts a phoenix standing on a pile of burning world currencies, wearing a gold chain or a gold coin around its neck with some very interesting inscriptions on it. Specifically, it has the year 2018 written on it, with a symbol that looks a whole lot like some of the same symbols on many of today's cryptocurrencies. But back in 1988, the internet, electronic cash, and peer-to-peer encrypted transactions were only on the radars of very few people. So back to my conversation with SwissAmerica's James Carrillo. After our conversation about the topics I just mentioned, he began telling me about a 29-page document that he had recently read, a document that he found on MIT servers written by 3 members of the NSA's Office of Information Security Research and Technology, Cryptography Division. And a copy of this white paper can be downloaded in the video description below. This document was written on June 18th, 1996, and it's titled How to Make a Mint, the Cryptography of Anonymous Electronic Cash. This document goes into incredible detail about the major components that make up Bitcoin and almost all other cryptocurrencies, like peer-to-peer exchange, encryption, anonymity, decentralization, and it goes into incredible detail about the digital ledger that would serve as what we know today as blockchain. It talks about the different ways to go about creating this so-called, quote, electronic cash, containing all these attributes, the pros and cons of each method, and which ones would be the most and least efficient in its final implementation. So the NSA had a cryptography division dating back to 1996, or at least 1996. And there's a white paper located on MIT servers that goes into great detail about why and how to build electronic cash. Now, what do we know about Bitcoin? We know that its origins begin with someone named Satoshi Nakamoto, a self-proclaimed 37-year-old Japanese computer programmer, who said that they had been writing the code since back in 2007. This was before the financial collapse. Nakamoto began the project on his own, but he eventually made the code open source and asked for help in developing what eventually became known as the Bitcoin cryptocurrency. We know that the first block was mined back in January of 2009 by Nakamoto and created the website with the domain bitcoin.org and continued to collaborate with other developers on the Bitcoin software until mid-2010. It's around this time that Nakamoto hands the control of the source code repository and network alert key to some guy named Gavin Anderson. transferred several related domains to various prominent members of the Bitcoin community, and ended his involvement in the project. Today, the blockchain ledger, the public Bitcoin transaction log, shows that Nakamoto's known addresses contain roughly 1 million Bitcoins, a value of roughly $7,651,670,000 based on today's valuation. But nobody has ever met Satoshi Nakamoto. Claims that he's a Japanese programmer are questionable due to the British slang he uses in many of his forum posts, his perfect English-speaking ability, the fact that his primary hours of communication are consistent with Greenwich Mean Time, or the time at the Royal Observatory in London, and the fact that he's never been identified by anybody else or himself. Nakamoto began writing code for Bitcoin a year before the financial collapse happened. Bitcoin may have been kept out of the spotlight and primarily used only by those who have a disdain for the banking system since its creation, but mainstream media brought it center stage in late 2017 or early 2018. Hedge funds, investment banks, and other foreign governments have embraced cryptocurrencies as the future of the digital world. Even the head of FinCEN, which is the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, a bureau of the United States Department of Treasury that collects and analyzes information about financial transactions in order to combat domestic and international money laundering, terrorist funding, and other financial crimes, said that Bitcoin was great for our economy and would be embraced by the US Department of Treasury. Companies like Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, and other large institutions have gone from being harsh critics of Bitcoin to jumping right on the bandwagon and embracing the cryptocurrency. So let's piece this all together. The Economist magazine publishes a magazine back in January of '88 that shows a phoenix standing on a pile of burning world currencies with a Bitcoin around its neck. This Bitcoin has written on it the year 2018. Fast forward to 96. In 1996, the NSA's cryptography division publishes a 29-page white paper about the importance of creating electronic cash and goes into great detail about how to do it. In 2007, the Bitcoin project gets underway by someone who nobody has ever met, who is now a billionaire due to the astronomical increase in value of the Bitcoin they own, and who won't reveal their true identity for some reason. We have a worldwide financial meltdown in 2008 and 2009, during which time Bitcoin's first block was mined. Now, during this meltdown, our country's currency and many others around the world are brought to the brink of disaster, creating worldwide distrust and disdain for the banking cartels and their practices. Among small circles of advocates, Bitcoin is touted as a means to circumvent the banking system and its fractional reserve lending practices during a time when a crisis caused by the banksters is still fresh in our minds. In mid-2010, the creator of Bitcoin disappears from the face of the earth, only to be heard from one other time in the future. And this was just to tell the public that the person who the mainstream media was claiming to be Satoshi Nakamoto was not the same Satoshi Nakamoto who created Bitcoin. He reared his head just to get on a blog forum and say, the person that the mainstream media is holding in front of you is not me. So the cryptocurrency remains underground for almost a decade, before emerging in 2017 and 2018 in the mainstream media as the savior of the world economy, creating an incredible demand for Bitcoins all around the world. This pushed the price of Bitcoin to an all-time high of over $19,000 per coin, with many convinced that it was going to go to $1 million per coin. Those all over the US began putting their entire net worth into Bitcoin by rolling over retirement accounts, investing discretionary income, and otherwise investing anything they can into Bitcoin. And since December, a series of hacks, inflated valuations, and the final step in what appeared to be a massive pump and dump scheme had brought the current price of Bitcoin down by almost 2/3 off of its all-time high, down to roughly about 7,600 today. Now here we are halfway 2018, still waiting for the final shoe to drop on the US dollar. From what the mainstream media, expert economists, hedge fund managers, and many other professionals tell us, there's nothing to worry about, just go back to sleep. But there are many other people out there sounding the alarm. Go check out Sean at the SGT Report, Cliff High at Half Past Human, Gons at the Face Like the Sun and Canary Cry Radio with his co-host Basil, and call my friend Jim Carrillo at SwissAmerica. Their voices aren't as loud as CNN, Bloomberg, Associated Press, or any of the other major media outlets owned and operated by the world's richest mobsters, but they are all providing facts about the truth of our nation's current circumstances. Those preaching the truth will refer to this scenario as the Hegelian dialectic, or also known as problem reaction solution, where a group of people engineer a problem for which they can already assume with a certain degree of certainty that a particular reaction will take place, for which they've already engineered a specific solution. If this whole set of circumstances was based on this particular agenda, it would kind of go something like this. A financial meltdown caused by the banking cartels leads people to being more aware of how financially irresponsible these banks are. And banks that are already too big to fail will ultimately cause taxpayers more and more financial burdens. This will cause people to look for an alternative means of buying and selling goods, not just domestically, but all over the world. A method of payment that removes the banks from power, influence, and keeps them from having a direct influence over the financial well-being of us all needs to happen. So a digital currency containing all of these attributes that the public desires is already up and ready to go by the time everything hits the fan. Thus, the consolidation of the global currency systems into a digitally controlled system that is secretly monitored, governed, and controlled by the world's secret government organizations is readily accepted and is now being used by the general population. I'm not in any way saying this is what we have. I'm just providing some facts and painting a picture based on what I can see, smell, and touch. I want to remind you that hard assets are the best type of investments to own during times of instability in our currency. This is why the price of gold and silver spiked so high during 2008. If you have questions about precious metals, call my friend Jim Carrillo at SwissAmerica and tell him that Dean from Defending Your Finances sent you. He treats all of his clients like family, especially the hardworking family of the financial defenders that listen to our show and who are eager to protect what matters to them the most. Jim's email and the link to his LinkedIn page is in the video description below. I would also be extremely cautious of owning cryptocurrencies due to the fact that they're just as susceptible to manipulation and carry with them zero liquidity. And if this game of connect the dots does in fact connect the NSA to the creation of Bitcoin, putting all of your money into the cryptocurrency system would be no different than having all of your money in the privately controlled system run by banks who have caused this mess in the first place. So do your own research and understand the big picture. Read the white paper, the link is in the video description below. Don't let loud and misleading voices trick you into making catastrophic mistakes with your money that you work hard every day for.